At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me, listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day, I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one that comes in the name of the Lord.'" The Gospel of the Lord. How often I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you are not willing. Many of us have similar experiences as we often go against what people say. Being a teenager, I totally understand this. Going against what people say because I believe I know everything. In fact, about 2 months ago, I walked into the church office as I do every morning before confirmation class. Pastor Eric and Grant were sitting there. Pastor had asked me about what verse I had wanted to pick for my sermon. Now, I hadn't looked at the bulletin for that day, so I didn't even know what verses were there. I said no, and so I had been given a bulletin for today. Then everything else had gone on as normal. 2 weeks later, I walked in and Pastor, Grant, and Ben were all sitting at the table, Ben at the other end working on his sermon. I sat down next to Ben and took out my iPad to work on my sermon as well. I confess that I often mess around while doing work. Pastor walked over to us and we all started talking about the whole sermon ordeal. I had highlighted my bulletin that I had gotten. I highlighted almost every word and still couldn't tell you the point of the verse I used. It was the only one that was not highlighted. Now this is where the whole story will start to make sense to you. Pastor had told me about wanting to start my sermon as soon as possible so that it could be overlooked before I actually had to go out and speak in front of people. Me, being a teenager, didn't fully understand why, so I didn't listen. He had warned me about how nervous and anxious I would be if I didn't follow the advice he was giving me. Again, not listening, I didn't take the advice seriously. 2 weeks before the sermon, I had just realized that I probably needed to actually start working on my sermon. So I did. Stress-filled, but started working on it anyway. I needed to have my sermon ready to check over that following Sunday. So Sunday morning, acting as if I hadn't just written it the night before, and procrastinated so long that I was getting behind, I brought what I had. We worked on it together to have a usable sermon. That brings us to today, where I now understand all of the advice and warning Pastor Eric had given me. As I walked into the church this morning, I felt my stomach turn, almost as if I had to puke or had eaten something bad the following night. The usual happy smile on my face was not there as I walked in, but instead a scared look, hoping that I was just in a dream and had actually written my sermon weeks and weeks before, like I was told to do instead of 2 weeks before. As I stand up here now, I have hives up my hands and feel like I'm going to puke, though I know I don't actually have to. This is the part where I actually understand the reason I should have listened to all of the warnings and advice from Pastor Eric. He attempted to make an effort to teach me how to make a sermon without being as anxious as I am. saving me from wanting to die out of stress and embarrassment of messing up. But as time progressed, I hadn't listened. My story may sound familiar to a lot of people. Maybe you have stories similar in your experiences, like this. This is what Jesus is talking about in today's gospel. Jesus had come to save people and tell them how to live in love, how people could follow the teachings he had set forth. He tried, but they were unwilling to follow him. And we are still unwilling. We still sin and stray away from Jesus. He attempts to give us the teachings and advice that we need in order to live a healthy and peaceful life without sin. But we are still unwilling to follow. We still disobey and sin. He has desire to protect us from evil and sin, but we were unwilling to do that. He had attempted to make us all peaceful with each other and gather together under one place and help us understand the evil of sin, but we stray away from the path of righteousness. Even if we don't mean to or try to be as sinless as we can, we are still full of sin and hate. Something Jesus wanted to warn us about. We should all attempt to follow Jesus and be one of the baby chicks under his wings instead of straying away from them. We don't need to earn a place under his wings. We just need to allow him to gather us. So let's stop fighting Jesus and make this easy on ourselves and be gathered under his loving wings. Amen.